Hello, School Transportation Nation. Excited you made it back to the podcast. It's brought to you by TransFinder, the leader in school bus routing software, and by School Radio, your source for reliable radio communications. In just a bit, our own Ryan Gray is going to be talking with our special guest, the Transportation Director of the Year. It is Craig Beaver, Director of Transportation for Beaverton School District in Oregon, STN Transportation Director of the Year, front cover, STN Magazine, November edition. Ryan, I'm really excited. And how apropos that Craig Beaver from Beaverton, right? It's just got to be meant to be with the name, right?
Rolls right off the tongue. As he says in our November article written by our very own Taylor Ekbatani, it was destiny. Kismet, if you will. So we talk about that, talk about how he made his move from the San Diego area. Some of you might remember that Craig was the Director of Transportation for Grossmont Union High School District down in San Diego. And he, after about 15 years there, he moved up to the Pacific Northwest. Tells me the story about he and his wife wanted to move. They wanted to go up there. They weren't sure where they were going to go. And hey, the Beavers landed in Beaverton. So a lot of folks know that Beaverton, that's the home of the Nike headquarters up there, just basically in the Portland metro area. He calls it the Silicon Forest. I think a lot of people do. So he talks about everything from, hiring school bus drivers, his leadership, to one of the big reasons we selected him, his adoption and sharing data of electric school buses. So he's got the largest electric fleet up there in Oregon, one of the largest transportation operations in Oregon as well. And he shares a lot of data. One of the big reasons he was awarded, or actually Beaverton School District was awarded the Clean Fleets Award for their adoption of electric at the ACT Expo that we attend every year. That was in Las Vegas. We caught up with him there and broke the news to him that, hey, there was some more accolades coming his way. So great article. Read it. Head over to stnonline.com. It's the issue just dropped a couple days ago. And we're gonna dive in and we'll have a really nice long conversation. So it's really entertaining.
Yeah, really looking forward to that, Ryan. I know there's a lot happening. November, we're full of exciting announcements. Obviously, President of the United States, at this recording was not yet decided, but it is like days, moments, hours away, I'm sure, for the announcement to be made, which, that'll hopefully set the tone for what the next 4 or 8 years is going to look like and how that might affect our industry, our lives, and definitely a lot to keep an eye on in the news cycle over the next coming weeks. And we also are headed into Dallas for the TSD conference. The team is taking off. We're leaving within days to get out in Frisco, Texas, November 7th through the 12th. We've got the conference, the Ultimate in Special Needs Training. You guys are all invited. I know it's a last-second decision, but if you haven't signed up, we're taking registrations. We'll make a badge for you on site. We got a lot of excitement out there. Probably be north of maybe 550, 600 people in total. So we've got a great audience out there looking to learn a lot about special needs transportation.
Absolutely. From the news cycle standpoint, something, Tony, that we've seen, I don't know, I've lost count. I think it was like 5 times or 4 times. I don't remember what. The School Bus Safety Act in Congress was reintroduced. It was first introduced in 2018. There has been a Senate version. Senator Tammy Duckworth from Illinois has really championed that one. In the House, Representative Steve Cohen from Tennessee has introduced those, and Representative Cohen announced last month that he was reintroducing the School Bus Safety Act in the House. I hadn't seen a bill number yet for it, but essentially what we're looking at, Tony, is legislation seeking to require lap shoulder seatbelts on school buses. Also, electronic stability control systems. We've really seen those get adopted, at least by the big 3, Bluebird IC bus and Thomas Built buses. Now that we have the electric school buses, We haven't seen some of that yet, but we've been told by the electric school bus manufacturers, hey, they're going to comply with any regulation or legislation that comes about. But certainly from a free market standpoint, you're going to see a lot more of that, because once something similar to what Bluebird did with lap shoulder belts earlier this year, where they made the announcement they're going to be the first company to make that standard and at no additional cost. It figures that others will follow eventually. Now, we haven't seen that in seatbelts yet, but certainly Representative Cohen is hoping to get that pushed forward a little bit further in ways than it had been the previous iterations. We know that there is a Senate version that Senator Tammy Duckworth reintroduced last September. It hasn't really moved in the House. It was in one of the committees. But in addition to the seatbelts, I mentioned ESC, also looking at automatic emergency braking. So we know that, NHTSA came out with their final rule earlier this year for passenger vehicles. And I had actually written an article when that final rule was being debated earlier this year, that it could have some significance in terms of the illegal passing epidemic. A lot of folks call it here, in this industry, in terms of not only having the vehicles automatically brake when it senses a vehicle, to like an impending crash, but also a pedestrian. So that's certainly something that falls right in the target zone for illegal passing. But certainly if that's something that, school buses get as well, now we're seeing that adopted already. So a lot of these technologies or these safety solutions are already available and are already being done. But certainly when it comes to seatbelts, Tony, still a great debate out there. We know that NHTSA has already weighed in on that several years ago, well before the pandemic, when they said that all school buses 10,000 pounds GVWR and below, so a lot of your Type A school buses, that would be mandated. So that's why we see all of today's Type A school buses have those lap shoulder seatbelts, because those vehicles more closely resemble passenger vehicles. They're mostly built on the E350 or 450 chassis from Ford or GM Savannah. So those are vehicles that we see on the road. But NHTSA said, no, we're not going to require them for the larger school buses, but certainly they're advocating if a school district on an individual basis can afford them and wants them, then they should do that. So we'll see if this bill moves any further than the previous iterations, but definitely seatbelts are still front and center in a lot of legislators' minds.
If I'm not mistaken, fire suppression was also in there too, Ryan.
Fire suppression systems also.
Remember taking a peek at the actual bill just to kind of refamiliarize myself to see what was in there. And I saw that in there again. And I thought, okay, again, the draw is if the students are belted in, in an evacuation, should there be a fire suppression could be beneficial. Obviously, we don't see that many vehicle fires, but it's not something that's being registered really on a daily basis that we see on a national level. It's more of a hyper local thing that you see in the media anecdotally. So it's always interesting to me when we identify bus fires and how evacuation plays a big role. And obviously we're doing an evacuation class at the TSD conference specific to getting special needs kids out, especially if they're in a wheelchair or they have medically fragile. How do you move those kids out safely? They can't just jump out of the back door like maybe gen ed kids could. So we're looking at a lot of the nuances of that. I know we've done smoke on the bus also at the TSD conference, which is always interesting to see just because you don't realize it till you're in there. And then obviously it's theatrical smoke, but the fog machine really, gives you that sense of panic. And it's always concerning. So always interesting stuff, Ryan, when we're talking about safety and kids and all the nuance to it.
Absolutely. And I've seen folks out there at that training, and they're reduced to tears. I mean, because it's so visceral, that reaction. Again, it's theater smoke, but it has its intended consequence of really, forcing people to say, hey, I can't see. I can't see what's going on. They don't have that acrid smoke smell. So that's that, but still they can't see. And it brings it home to our attendees, and they realize what could happen. And what does happen. I mean, it doesn't happen super often, but it does happen. There's some that say that there's a school bus fire at least once a week nationwide, maybe a little bit more frequent than that, but still you look at the large sample size, you have 400 and whatever it is, 50, 60, 70,000 buses nationwide, and you have, 50 to 100 bus fires. That's a pretty small number relatively, but still we know it happens. And as with everything, student transporters need to be prepared.
Yeah, really great stuff. Well, Ryan, I'm excited to dive a little more into the November edition. But before we get to that, we got a quick message. Hey guys, what do software, hardware, and safety have in common? One word: TransFinder. At the STN Expo in Reno, TransFinder won 3 Innovation Choice Awards, voted on by STN Expo attendees for best software, best hardware, best safety technology. TransFinder's Route Finder plus routing solution and apps, Stop Finder and Wayfinder, are well known in the industry. Not everyone realizes TransFinder provides hardware like card readers, tablets, and mounts. And as for safety, Patrol Finder for schools is TransFinder's latest solution designed to make buses and campuses safer. TransFinder's president and CEO, Antonio Civitella, said the recognition means so much because it's voted on by STN Expo attendees. Civitella said, "We know a lot is riding on TransFinder because a lot is riding on those yellow buses that travel through our communities. TransFinder must continue to innovate as more is being expected of transportation departments from district leadership as well as parents." Learn more at transfinder.com. That's transfinder.com. All right, we're back, Ryan. Obviously, if you guys picked up your November issue, you went to the stnonline.com website. If you go to the magazine tab or down the right column of the website, you'll see a big picture of Craig Beaver on there, Director of the Year, which we got that a conversation coming up real soon with Ryan and Craig. But before we get to that, want to just talk a little, Ryan, about some of the editorial within this issue. Obviously, it's our Transportation Director issue. We're talking a lot about leadership. We have a lot in there, topics really facing directors. What were kind of the highlights for you in the November issue that people should flip to and read this month?
Yeah, one of the big ones came from a session I planned at STN Expo West in Reno in July. Vishant Kotari, he's their battery expert and circularity expert at WRI, and he talked about the need to know where the battery chemistry is sourced. We've talked a bit about that over the past year or two. We know that China owns a lot of the world's stores of these different minerals and chemistries. Certainly, so what we're looking at right now is lithium-ion batteries, and there's really 2 types. There's the nickel, manganese, cobalt, which has been the earlier iterations of the electric batteries for school buses, and we still see those out there, but definitely moving to the lithium iron phosphate, and there are a couple of manufacturers that have those now, and we know that it is in development for others. So Vishant had a really great presentation and really had some good back and forth with the attendees and a lot of questions being asked. WRI did a survey of the OEMs asking where the different chemistries were sourced from, and hardly any of them responded. And these were school bus manufacturers, and some of the feedback from attendees as well as folks that WRI has talked to. Transportation directors, school districts, they're saying, hey, this isn't right. We need transparency. And, one woman even went as far as saying, hey, if an OEM can't tell me where these chemistries are sourced from, where the batteries come from, I don't want to buy them. And that's big. I mean, it's really coming down to to not only implementing the school buses and figuring out the charging. Yeah, that's what we've been talking about, and that's a huge deal, right? But now the conversation is shifting to where are these batteries sourced from? We know that in certain parts of the world where these minerals are mined, they come on the backs of child labor, slave labor. The folks are, if they're getting paid, they're getting paid pennies a day, similar to some of the conversations we've heard for a long time from the clothing apparel industry, right? The U.S. is consuming all of these clothes and shoes and whatnot, and they're becoming from countries that are basically third world countries, and they're taking advantage of their workers if they're even paying them at all, and it's just horrible conditions. So to have a great article on some state legislation and federal legislation that's looking at, hey, we need to figure out where these things are being sourced, and being able to actually have the ability for consumers to look that up and have it right on the battery packs, and shows the countries that it was sourced from, where it was transported, how it was transported, all of these elements to going into, okay, is zero emissions from the tailpipe, quote unquote. There's really no tailpipe, but there's so much of the conversation is about that. But we've also talked about the life cycle, the well to wheel, if you will, of all the different emissions, and is the batteries or the electricity made from a coal-fired fuel plant, or is it nuclear, or whatnot? So it's a great article that you can dive into if you have electric school buses, or if you're looking to get some, or you're just trying to kind of figure out what's the next step for your school district, your bus company. It's a great read. Also, we talk about fuel and buying fuel, because we know that most of the school buses out there are still fueled. They're still internal combustion engines. So we talk about the price and state contracts playing just as large, if not a bigger role than all the environmental discussions. That's what's getting in the news cycle, and that's what the mass media is talking about, is the Green New Deal and whatnot. And of course, that plays right into the presidential election. But we know that so many school buses, whether they be diesel, gasoline, propane, these are fuels, and still price is king in a lot of school districts. And staying on our leadership topic, we of course have Craig Beaver, which you've mentioned, and we're going to hear from him soon. But we also, this November, we moved our Rising Superstars profiles into this issue. So we look at the Transportation Director of the Year, someone who's seasoned, someone like Craig who's been in the transportation industry for decades and decades. But we also want to see and hear from the folks who are maybe coming up, or they've been flying under the radar. So that's also a great profile. You can catch that on stnonline.com. Again, Taylor Ekbatani, she is really our rising superstar here in the company, as well as she's really taken ownership of that feature every year. So some real great reads for you this month.
Yeah, my article too touches on the outcome of the presidential election, kind of prognosticating on where, as an industry, we could head potentially, specifically in the energy sector. Obviously, that's been a very hot topic in terms of federal funding and support. And, really, how are these administrations going to demonstrate their support of the industry and the potential of continued funding or not for school transportation? So we will see. I still believe it was probably a once in a lifetime opportunity here with some of the federal funds from some of the programs. But obviously, from a regulations or regulatory standpoint, we've seen a lot of moves from different agencies. And a lot of that is also going to depend on the Congress and the Senate. So it's not just the president. There are a lot of other stakeholders that make decisions within these organizations at a federal level. We have seen many states mandate different emission standards, as well as moving to EV. I know, looking at some recent survey data, definitely STN subscribers don't like being forced to buy electric. They do not like that one bit. They are like, no, we are not going to do that if we don't have to. We love propane. We love diesel. We haven't seen necessarily a reduction in appetite, but definitely the money is really driving a lot of the market. I think our OEMs have really made a big step. They've made the move. They've done the R&D. We're seeing it proliferate in school transportation, probably from an electric vehicle standpoint, faster than any other market vertical in commercial vehicles. So it will be interesting to see what the future holds, Ryan. And we talk a little more in depth about that in the November issue. So be interesting to see how this election shakes out and what it means for our industry. All right. Well, we are about to dive into the interview with Ryan and Craig. Before we do that, we've got a quick message. Hey, safety is a number one priority for everyone in school transportation, and even more so when needing to communicate in a school bus setting. School radios, push to talk over cellular or POC radios, are the safety enhancement you need to provide clear communication across all aspects of your fleet. Schools, SROs, that's school resource officers, and beyond. School radio helps take safety and connectivity a step further by offering interoperability solutions that bridge conventional two-way radios with POC systems, creating a unified network that boosts effectiveness and safety. This integrated strategy guarantees smooth communication in both emergency situations and daily activities. To learn more about how school radio can improve safety in your communication methods, visit school-radio.com. That's school-radio.com.
All right, let's welcome to the School Transportation Nation podcast stage, Craig Beaver, our 2024 Transportation Director of the Year, as selected by School Transportation News. Craig, it's great to see you. Thanks for being here, and congratulations.
Thank you so much, Ryan. I appreciate you having me on, and I am humbled and honored to be named the Transportation Director of the Year from STN. It's a great honor, and I really appreciate it.
Well, it's our honor to honor you. There's a lot of great reasons why we named you Transportation Director of the Year. You're joining an illustrious list. Some great folks over the years. I was counting. I think it's been like 19 years or something that we've been doing this award. And it actually started off as a leadership award that we did in conjunction with NAPT. And then several years ago, we transitioned to really being our sole award. So again, you join a list of some really great folks in the industry who've done a lot for the industry, for the kids. So you are in great company. So Craig, a little bit about you. You are the administrator for transportation at Beaverton School District in Oregon. So Craig Beaver at Beaverton. I actually knew your name originally from your time down at Grossmont Union High School District in the San Diego area. So it's kind of, if you read the article by Taylor Ekbatani in the November issue that just dropped last Friday, you'll get to know more about Craig and, of course, the naming convention there. But, as you mentioned in the article, Craig, it was, destiny that this happened.
It's a kismet, isn't it? You think that I was always destined to end up here. And honestly, I had no idea. After 15 years in San Diego, I retired from the California system, and my wife and I had wanted to move to the Pacific Northwest. We just didn't know where, and this was available. And so everything just kind of came together. And the same thing my family said. They looked at me and they said, "You've got to be kidding." And it really was. I guess it was destiny. So we're very happy and living up here. We love the Pacific Northwest, and Beaverton is a fantastic place to work and live.
Oregon is beautiful, absolutely. In the article, or actually in the table of contents, I couldn't resist it. I didn't put this on the cover because I didn't want to be overboard with it, but I couldn't resist it. In the table of contents, I referred to you as "Leave It to Beaver." I just, couldn't help it. And I had some folks, because of course that dates, I think, both of us in terms of that iconic 1950s television show. But a lot of the folks nowadays, they're looking at me going, leave it to Beaver. What does that mean? So hopefully it's not lost on all you out there in School Transportation Nation. So your background, Craig, before you moved, you and your wife moved up to the Pacific Northwest. As you mentioned, you were in San Diego. You were really born and raised there in San Diego. You were a military brat.
Yes, I was. I was actually born in Japan, and my dad was in the Navy for 30 years and retired, and we lived in Hawaii and we lived in Long Beach, but we spent the greatest amount of time in San Diego. So I did most of my public school through high school. I graduated from high school in San Diego, and then I went on and went to the University of San Diego, private school in San Diego as well, and was able to spend my college years there. And I was a great time back in the late 70s and early 80s. And I was fortunate enough to be able to play college football during those 4 years, very blessed. And then I had to get a real job and went to work. So
the Toreros there at the Catholic University. One of my cousins went there and actually was married there. They have a beautiful cathedral right off the 5 freeway as you're heading down from into the San Diego greater San Diego area. But it doesn't surprise me that you played college football, because when I met you, I think the first time that I think I'd seen you at conferences, but really the first time I really got to know you was at the ACT Expo, Advanced Clean Transportation Expo in Las Vegas earlier this year in May. And you were actually there because you received another award. You were honored. The Beaverton School District was really honored for your adoption of electric school buses. But when I met you there, and we'll get into that story, soon. But when I met you, I'm like, wow, this guy's really tall. So when you were an offensive lineman, that's correct?
Yes, I was. I played in the offensive line, several positions in the offensive line, and in high school and college both. So again, talk about teamwork and behind the scenes and making things possible. And so all those things translated into life very well, into my work life. And we're kind of still doing the same thing now. I think all of us in the transportation industry, school people industry, kind of do that. We're behind the scenes folks, and we just make things happen. People come to us with, this is what we need, and they don't really understand what it takes to get it done. And we all just kind of find a way to make it happen. So good life skills learned over those years.
Absolutely. Teamwork.
Absolutely.
And going to war, figuratively with your buddy next to you in the trenches, certainly that instills, some great qualities that, translate into the business world and leading people as you've done. So, and it's interesting, you're in Oregon now, and I have to ask you this, Beaver.
Yep.
You have the Beavers there at Oregon State. They're not doing so hot, but their arch rival there, the Oregon Ducks. They're number 1 in the nation as we're recording this. I don't know what happens over the weekend, but so who are you pulling for, Ducks or Beavers?
We're kind of a house divided. That's a big thing here with up in Oregon, and I tend to be a Beaver, and my wife tends to root for the Ducks. So we're kind of a house divided, but really we're a state of Oregon family, and even the flag has a beaver on it. I don't know if you know this, Oregon's one of the few states that has a 2-sided flag. On one side is the seal of the great state of Oregon, and on the other side is a beaver. And so, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. It's kind of fun, kind of neat. And what they made it very clear to me, my coworkers made it very clear to me when I started here who I would be rooting for with my last name. And sometimes it's a conflict. Once a year, it's a conflict. During that war, during the Civil War.
Civil War, yep.
And, but yeah, it's a lot of fun. Everything's in good nature, and it's a lot of fun, and we try and have fun with my name. It's been that way the whole life. So, but yeah, it's a great state. The Pacific Northwest is beautiful, and frankly, when I came up here, I wasn't fully educated with the benefits of what the state does for school transportation, and it's just tremendous between reimbursement levels and depreciation reimbursements for school buses. It's just it's really good to work in the state of Oregon in the school bus business.
Quite a bit different than California, where you spent the first, 15 years or so at Grossmont?
Yeah, I spent 15 years as a director of transportation at Grossmont Union High School District. At the time, there were 12 high schools in it and about 22,000 kids. So great district, great leadership, great people down there, but a different kind of model with respect to reimbursement and transportation services are offered. And then before that, I spent 17 years in the trucking business in a company called Roadway Express, which was bought out by Yellow Truck Lines, and then Yellow recently.
YRC, right? Well, they're known as YRC Freight. That's probably what folks would know them by now.
Right, YRC. And then that's ceased a couple of years ago. They went out of business a couple of years ago. So many of the skills that I have today, I learned at Roadway Express, how to manage people. And, I was an engineer and a supervisor for them, and then a manager, a terminal manager for them. Learned a lot of different skills, and really was able to put things into action and be creative. And those skills translated very well into the school bus industry. At Grossmont at the time, the assistant superintendent, kind of thought out of the box and hired me, somebody with no school bus experience, but a lot of heavy duty vehicle experience, and took a chance. And that has ultimately got me to where I am now. And the next step will be retirement. But yeah, Oregon is a great place to, had a lot of support for school pupil transportation. Grossmont we had a lot of support at Grossmont for pupil transportation as well.
When you were transitioning from Roadway Express to Grossmont, that was around 2001?
Exactly, right. In 2001, that happened.
Oh, that was an interesting year.
Well, my very first day at work, unfortunately, it is marked by a very tragic incident. But my first day at work, the first hour I was at work that day, one of our high schools, unfortunately, was the victim of a school shooter in 2001, and unfortunately, a couple of kids were killed and several were injured. And that was my first exposure to emergency response in the people transportation business and evacuating a school and things like that. So it was really sobering. The gravity of what working with students means was very apparent very quickly. And I've never forgotten that. I'll never forget that first day. And the response that that our employees had was just tremendous. They, jumped into action. We put buses on scene quickly and evacuated as many kids as we could out of the area. And it just learned, saw a lot of great people doing some great things that day. And that's always stayed with me.
And of course, 9/11, was that before or after this incident at the high school?
Yeah, 9/11 was after. This was in March of
2001.
2001 was that. And then September 11th happened. And again, very sobering. Being on the other side of the nation when that happened, it was early in the morning when all that things happened, and our operation had kind of just gotten underway, and I think we all just kind of went through, and we were all stunned like everybody else in the nation. And fortunately, we didn't have any events in Southern California that affected us. We were very fortunate with that, but it was a tremendous year.
Certainly, definitely, like what you said, sobering. And a lot of folks in the industry, obviously, they were around for a good spell before that happened. So they remember what school transportation was like before that, before we had all this new training. That's really what launched the security training. Really, I mean, there had been some high profile incidences involving school buses before, and of course the school shootings with like Columbine that happened the previous decade that really got the ball rolling with that. But we really saw things ramp up. after 9/11, and TSA formed, the Department of Homeland Security, all the training First Observer that they do for school bus drivers nationwide and have been doing for more than a decade. So certainly, you came in, and like I said, it's a very quote unquote interesting time. So now I mentioned you were at Grossmont for about 15 years. And then you and your wife decided that you wanted to move. And here you go again, destiny. You get up to Beaverton, much larger fleet, right, than you were used to down in San Diego.
Yes, we had in San Diego, we had about 75 buses, and we transported about 2,000 kids a day and about 2,000 trips a year. Beaverton, quite a bigger, 40,000 kids in the district. Right now, we are at 325 buses, 270 drivers, and we travel about 3.5 million miles a year right now. We transport 25,000 kids a day, which is about 65% of the population. So, and we have 6 high schools, so we do a tremendous amount of trips. We do about 4,000 trips a year. Much bigger operation. I will say, when I came in, they had a lot of great systems in place. My predecessors had done a tremendous job with setting up processes and systems to handle such things. We have some great partners with our routing software, using transversal routing software and our maintenance software, and our OEMs with Bluebird and IC are our primary OEMs right now for ICE vehicles, ICE vehicles. So a lot of things were in place, and we just, fortunately, a great driver pool and management staff. And I just, tried very hard just to kind of, take that to the next level. Hiring has always been as it is here, as it is across the country. Hiring drivers has always been the foremost priority with us. It's the top of my board since the day I walked in here in big red letters, hiring. That's the number one priority. And we have gone through the cycle of, especially after the pandemic, we were able to hold on to many of our drivers. But after the pandemic, we saw a dip like everybody else. We've been able to bounce back. Our district really stepped up to the plate and raised driver wages significantly 3 years ago. That's helped us a great deal. We have a great benefit package. So right now, for example, we've added 25 drivers so far this year, and we've lost about 20. We've added 25, and I have 20 more right now that are either actively training. I think half of those are actively training behind the wheel, and the other half are getting their commercial permits, and will be starting training over the next couple of weeks. So we worked very hard on it to continually replenish our driver fleet. I think in the Northwest, and what we found is, especially up here in Oregon, we're in the Silicon Forest, as they call it. We have Intel up here. Nike's world headquarters are here in Beaverton. There's a lot of other manufacturing companies. So our workforce tends to be a little bit older, folks that may have retired or left the silicon industry, and this is either second or their third career possibly. So very stable workforce, but it is transitory over the course of several years. So we have to continually hire.
So in your experience, and going back even to Grossmont, because we know that the quote unquote driver shortage, or labor shortage, really is what it's turned into, and I know that there's some pushback on that word shortage now, but we've seen, as you mentioned, the ability to hire school bus drivers. That's been really endemic to this industry. It's nothing that was just happened all of a sudden coming out of COVID-19. It existed before. I mean, it goes back decades. When you joined Grossmont, it's probably one of the first things that you realized, and you were told that, hiring school bus drivers, that's going to be a challenge.
Well, actually, even before that, at Roadway Express, we had, I learned early on, and when I was in Long Beach as an operations manager, my terminal manager at the time, his motto was, when you think you have enough people, hire some more, because you don't. And I've never forgot that. I've lived by that. Everybody that's worked for me has heard me say that. And it's very true, because it doesn't take much to get behind. We run all of our operations so tight. so that one thing happens, one person leaves or something happens, somebody gets injured, and it gets tight. There's just not a lot of fat there in any of our operations across the nation, I believe. And so we have to continually do it. And fortunately, I've been able to work for districts that have the foresight and the wherewithal to be able to provide for that. And from a monetary and a benefit standpoint, that we're able to attract folks and get them here. But we also work very hard, on driver satisfaction and driver morale, trying to, make it as pleasant a operation as possible, and inviting people to do things. We try and get our folks involved with decision making and things like that. So, but yes, it's a constant struggle here as it is everywhere else, but you have to prioritize it and make it happen.
Yeah, definitely. I know that a lot of the headlines that you see out there revolve around the school bus driver quote unquote shortage. A lot of headlines also about that, as you mentioned, the truck driver shortage. I think there's the American Trucking Association say there's like 3.5 million truck drivers, but as you mentioned, not enough. And that gets a lot of the federal play, right? A lot of the federal bills or programs that we've been seeing really addressing the truck drivers. We haven't seen any of those federal programs addressing school bus drivers, but we have seen federal funds for other things, electric school buses. And that's one of the reasons I mentioned at the top of why we are honoring you. There's a much more to the story, as Taylor Ekbatani writes in the November issue. But okay, electric school buses, hot button topic right now. So as we're recording this, we're days away from the presidential election. Obviously, the electric quote unquote mandate or the new Green Deal has been in the news a lot lately. Tony and I have been talking about this for weeks and months on the podcast. Hypothesizing, predicting, ruminating on will there be another $5 billion over 5 years like we see with the current Clean School Bus program. You have tapped into a lot of those funds. So let's go through the story of how electric school buses, and not only electric school buses, but you have a sizable propane school bus fleet as well.
Yes, we do.
Tell us how you launched that green initiative there in Beaverton.
I got here in 2015, and in 2016, there was DERA, the state of Oregon, the Department of Environmental Quality manages the DERA funds, the federal DERA funds from the Volkswagen settlement and mitigation case. And so it started originally with rebates on propane buses. And so we started buying propane buses in 2015. And for 5 or 6 years straight, we bought Type C, small wheelbase, 24 passenger, 1 or 2 wheelchair seat school buses propane, and we got rebates on it. So right now, we replaced diesel buses. So we're up to 66 propane buses we operate right now on our special needs fleet. So that was the very first thing. And then in 2020, Portland General Electric, PGE, here began a grant program for electrifying school bus fleets, and so we were able to get in on that. We've been in on 5. We've been awarded 5 consecutive years, a little over $2 million now, and they've helped us purchase 9 electric school buses. That was kind of how we got into the electric school bus part, was taking advantage of PGE's operation, and that paid for the incremental cost. And so it made sense to us to try and dip our toes into it a little bit. Being the first ones, we had the first electric buses in the state of Oregon, and the first charging infrastructure for electric buses in the state of Oregon. And it didn't cost us any more than if we were going to buy a diesel bus. So it was really economically, it made sense. It worked out well. We wound up buying, I think we also wind up operating about 5 buses. And then the EPA program came out. We applied for the rebate just like everybody else, and we didn't get it because we didn't qualify as a priority district at the time. But when the grant program came out and the ability to self-certify, that kind of changed everything. We were able to self-certify, and we were fortunate enough to be awarded $19.75 million from the EPA to replace 50 diesel school buses. And so that's what we're doing in the process. We have 42 of those buses in service now, and we're expecting the balance of our orders to come in December and February. And we have 31 chargers, and in about 2 weeks, they're going to start construction on 36 more chargers. And hopefully within the next 3 months, we're going to finish out with another 30 chargers at my southern location. So, the reason we got into it originally was to lower our footprint and give, the highest quality air quality and emissions to our most at-need students. Before there was any mandate to use either electric or propane buses on routes with students that are historically underserved, we already did it. We naturally did that first in our Title I elementary schools. We have 11 of them. But even beyond that, the Title I elementary schools, after kids matriculate out of that, they go to middle and high school, although they're not technically in a Title I school anymore, their living circumstances in many cases really hasn't changed. So we keep those buses in the same area. Here at Beaverton, we have 5 different tiers that we run for elementary, middle, and high school. And we also have option schools, which are kind of like magnet schools. And we have CTE programs that we do direct busing for and things like that. So we're massing those buses, especially electric buses, in those areas so that we can give the highest, the most current technology to kids that otherwise normally hadn't gotten those advantages. And then also we're expanding to the rest of the district. So again, those are the big reasons why. The reason we went in really heavy with it is, again, we're going to have 5 different platforms that we're using, 5 different OEMs that we're using. And we did that for a couple of reasons. Number one, to diversify the risk in case we have a specific OEM model that wasn't working quite as well as other ones. So we wanted to diversify and spread our risk a little bit. But also because of our size, we're able to leverage our size and take some risks and do some things that smaller districts aren't able to do. One of the biggest things that I found in Oregon versus California was just the number, especially Southern California, is the number of small districts there are. Portland Public, Beaverton, and Salem are the 3 largest districts in the state, and we make up about 75% of the total busing for the state between the 3 of us. There's many districts that are 10 buses or 8 buses or 12 buses and things like that aren't able to, one bus goes down and that could be 12 or 14% of their entire fleet. They can't afford to risk it on an electric bus or something like that. We can. If I have, even if I have 10 buses that go down, it's not a major hit when you have 325 of them. We can figure that out. So that's the other reason. And so we've taken great pains to publish all the data that we have. It's on our website. If you go to the public website under the Beaverton School District under transportation, and it's called Environmental Efforts. And I publish every month a number of indicators there. And, we do that so people can see how their performance is. I recently started tracking the difference between Type C and Type D buses because we run both kinds of electric buses. And we're finding our Type C buses get much better efficiency over the road than our Type D buses. And, there's several reasons we think for that. But as we go and develop more, we'll be able to, really dial in and see that. And, we're starting to see the improvements in efficiencies by, drivers getting used to running them because they operate different. You have to drive them different than you drive a diesel. You don't have to mash your foot on the accelerator on an electric bus. It gets up and goes pretty quick versus that hesitation that everybody knows about in a diesel. So, we're learning as we go and we're openly sharing. I've been fortunate enough to be able to speak at several conferences over the last couple of years. And I'm just trying to tell people this is what's happening here. And because it's so new, there's just not a lot of answers out there. There's not a lot of folks. I mean, I'm on a working group with a cold weather working group with, for example, Boston Public is a big name in there, and they've got 700 buses in Boston Public. It gets cold here, but it doesn't get Boston Public cold here. Yeah. And so, because nobody's really been through a winter with a lot of buses yet to see what that is. So it's fun, it's interesting, and all of us everybody I've run into so far has been very open and very honest with what the kind of results they're getting, what's working, what's not working. And we're continuing to do that, to share the knowledge we have and hopefully bring some folks along with us.
And you were on that panel with Boston Public Schools at STN Expo during our Green Bus Summit in Reno at STN Expo West in July, and shared some of that information. And you had mentioned the data. You can find that website if you go to the article, read the article either in print later this month or definitely online. But some of the stats that you were mentioning, sharing that data, that's another reason why we awarded you this recognition this month, that transparency. And I'm not sure if these numbers are still correct, but as of writing this article, or when we went to press, when you were talking about some of the, comparing electric school buses with diesel, with propane, your cost per mile to operate diesel was around $1.06. Propane 72 cents per mile. Electric 56 cents per mile. So we've heard a lot over the really almost decade now that, we've had electric school buses, or at least, 2016 really was when we first started really seeing them start hitting the market and talking about the cost savings. I'm curious, certainly that's if you're saving, basically you're cutting your cost per mile in half, on average. That's a huge savings alone. What about maintenance? What have you guys seen with maintenance? Because that's what we've heard a lot is too. Obviously you don't have the fuel filters and the oil changes and the oil filters and all those things from those internal combustion engines, or ICE as you were referring to earlier.
Yeah. Quick update. Just that was, again, as the data points get bigger and bigger, we're able to get more solid data. So basically right now it's about 3 times more. It's 1/3 the cost of an electric bus to a diesel. Right now through this year from July, it's about $1.75 per mile total cost for our diesel buses. Okay. And it's 61 cents per mile for an electric bus. And our total cost for bus on a monthly basis is about $700, and it's about $200 for an electric bus. So the savings is obviously not just the electricity versus the diesel fuel, but you're right. We do safety inspections every 2,500 miles. We have annual inspections. That's about it. And those safety inspections that used to take, 4 hours to do take about an hour now, because there's a whole bunch of stuff they don't have to look at anymore. Basically, we're looking at, again, I'm really paraphrasing here, but again, we're looking at brakes and tires and things like that versus all the fluids and everything else with it. So, we haven't seen any differences in tire wear. Some of the stories I heard was, well, you're going to go through tires a lot faster. Well, we've been running them since 2022 full time, and we still haven't, replaced any tires on those first buses yet. And, and they're getting used every single school day. They're getting used 190 days a year, basically, or more. So it's not just what the cost is from the inspections and all that, but also the productivity that we've seen in the increase in the shop, because now they can do those inspections, quicker. They're able to get more work done in the same man hour than they used to prior. So there's just so many things, and I'll be honest, I haven't been able to measure that at the time to really measure that and dial into it yet. I really want to do that. I just haven't got that part yet. But yeah, I think the benefits, there's even more benefits, I think, under the surface as we look more at it than I think any of us even realized. Just the obvious stuff with fuel and the cost of parts, replacement parts. I will say it's really important, though, to have a strong, a strong relationship with your OEM. We, again, 5 platforms, we've run into some speed bumps with, working with chargers, having them hook up to chargers and things like that. All of our OEMs have been very good, been great to work with, and both on the vehicle side and on the charger side too, because it is a two-way street. They have to work together. And so those are important things to know. I mean, one of the things we talked about is really, knowing what you're going to buy and communicating that to your other vendors to make sure that everything works together. That's one of the biggest lessons that we learned, even bigger lesson than talk to your utility. That's everybody says that. I can't say that enough. But the second biggest thing is communicate before you buy it what you want to buy and make sure everything talks to each other and has been proven in the past to work. And not just theoretical. It's pretty helpful if somebody says, yes, we're using that, or yes, we're testing on that product and it works fine. So, but again, with anything new, we run into speed bumps. We knew those things were going to happen and we're prepared for it. And again, that's one of the reasons we talk about leveraging our operation. We can absorb those blows, so to speak, without impacting student service.
You hit the nail on the head there with so much of what you just said. And, I was thinking, when you were talking about the tires too, because I know we've written about that, and training your drivers and your staff, how to work with these vehicles, how to operate them, how to maintain them. I know there's an interesting article that we have up on the website that's tied to your article, a really innovative shop or garage internship program where you're working with the high school students setting up a program. And that was really, speaking to your leadership, we talk with your shop supervisor, Cliff Harrell, and he talks about how this was something he wanted to do for a long time and was shot down. Then you became the director, essentially the administrator for transportation. I know that Oregon has a little bit different nomenclature for their transportation directors. But you said, your leadership style is, hey, if they can sell you on something, hey, let's give it a shot. Let's see what happens. And then you've had a lot of success with this internship program.
We did. We had a high school that has a CTE program, a career technical program for auto repair for many years, a very successful program. And we, gave them, we had some diesel engine, we pulled some diesel engines out and we talked about, let's give it to them to kind of try to introduce them into the diesel side again. And we did it. We did it also to help students and that kind of thing. But we also had we wanted to establish a pipeline for new technicians, because technicians, I would venture to say, are harder to get than drivers. They're just so difficult to get in this industry. And so we kind of did that with the eye of it. And again, we started with 2 kids 2 years ago, and that moved into the following year. Last year we had 4 kids, and these are juniors and seniors in that program that come up here and work 1 or 2 days a week in our shop, and they work next side by side with a certified technician. We got the students are certified by the state of Oregon to do safety inspections on buses, so they're doing safety inspections. Any repairs that they do, obviously, they're being supervised and signed off by a certified technician. But again, one of the students from our first class, he graduated from high school, and we turned around and hired him as a service technician, and he's been with us, and we're just thrilled to death. This last year, we have a student that is on the fence right now. That he's going to be a senior this year. Or he is a senior this year. He's not sure if he wants to go to college or he wants to take more of a technical school type of thing. So, we're hoping to be able to hire that person as well. We've got some young ladies. We've got female students in here, which I'm just tickled to death about. I'd like to see the expansion of that even more. We had female drivers at Roadway Express at terminals I managed, and it brings it. It's very helpful for the entire situation. Everybody's familiar with the school bus industries and the male-female balance, so we're trying to implement that too into the shop situation. So we're excited. Again, the supervisors here are they think out of the box. I encourage them to think out of the box, and they do a great job. They come up with ideas. And, we try a lot of stuff. Sometimes we fail, but other times, we strike gold. So it's interesting. It makes it fun to come to work for everybody. So, yeah, I was given those opportunities coming up, and I vowed to give others opportunities like that when I got to that position. So I'm trying to pay back what was given to me.
Absolutely. Being able to implement some of those programs, and when you're talking about the young labor force, and we just talked so much about electric school buses, and there's been a lot of talk about, hey, this is a great way to hopefully attract some younger talent, folks that see, hey, they're no longer the dirty, quote unquote, diesel, and you're going to get all greasy and gross, and they're rolling computers essentially, and they're only going to become more so as more and more electric is adopted, and we're looking more at vehicle to not just vehicle to grid, but vehicle to everything. Where the buses and are going to be eventually down the road, as more and more vehicles, all the vehicles on the road have to get to this point, but where they're talking to each other, talking to street lights, talking to the buildings, talking to the electrical charging and the grid and whatnot. Which leads me to one of my last questions. I know what's next, and I know you're working on microgrid. You're looking at the above ground charging that we've been reporting on lately. I know First Student really is leading the way with that. Tell us what some of those plans are.
Well, the first what's next is one thing we found that was very economical and works very well is we put some portable chargers in our shop. We put 3 different portable chargers in our shop. It was much less expensive to do that, with a 480 line, but the charger itself is its own transformer and everything else in a box. And so we're able to put in 4 charging stations that way, and they move about 10 or 15 feet. Therefore, they're portable, as they say, but it's really a great thing where you can pop in, do it. Their DC chargers, pop in and do that. So that's kind of one thing that we're doing, and one thing I wanted to throw out there for folks. And again, as you spoke about in our southern location, our southern terminal, we're going to put another 30 or 35 chargers there. But we're also looking at putting in solar or photovoltaic PV. We're also looking at some resiliency in terms of whether that's going to be an above ground emergency generator, whether that's going to be a microgrid where we can, our greatest fear is that if we go offline for several days, last year, there was a 4-day ice storm here in Portland. We weren't affected here in Beaverton, but the city of Portland, much of the city of Portland was out of power for 4 days. If that were to happen and that happened over the Christmas break time, so it wasn't a big impact for schools. But if that were to happen now, for whatever reason, we lose power for 4 days, 100 buses, that's going to hurt. We have to have some sort of ability, to help ourselves out with that. And that's where the microgrid comes in. So we're working with various partners right now. We've done some study to see what it would take if it's gonna make do. We're looking at what's the best way forward. Do we do that ourselves? Do we do it through the utility with a make-ready program? Do we do it through a third-party provider and do energy as a service? There's just so many directions that we can go, and that's what we're evaluating right now. I do know that we're going to have some sort of resiliency at that facility. We have the room for it. And again, that's another thing to take into account is when you're putting in your chargers, looking at the total picture. It's not just about the chargers. It's about resiliency and backup and things like that. So it's fun. The First Student, what they're doing is tremendous. Basically a microgrid in a box. There's some other folks out there that are doing it as well. We work with a company out of Canada pretty closely that's based in Montreal that came out of the oil field industry that kind of did the same thing, and they've brought it over to the school bus industry. And so we looked at that as an opportunity as well and to see if we would go that way. So there's a lot of ways you can go out there, and we'll see how it develops right now. A lot of it, again, is tied to funding. Right now, there's not any federal funding for anything behind the meter. And I may be missing that in front of, yeah. Which direction you're looking. But basically, nobody will pay for transformers and switchgear right now.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of money.
Yeah, that's the front of the meter. So on the utility side, so we're seeing the money behind the meter, at the school district or school bus company. But so before I let you go, again, I mentioned early on the election is days away. If you have your crystal ball, I'm not asking you to predict for the presidential election, but are we going to see another pot of federal funds that go towards electric and propane? But 98% of the funds so far have been for electric. Are we at that point where we still need that funding, or is this the seed money that we needed and free market's going to take off from there?
I think the seed, to me, from my opinion and my point of view, the seed money certainly helped. Part of the reason we went after this also was that this was this level of funding I've never seen in my life. And I don't know if we will ever see this level again. We've seen the EPA transform and how they're awarding the money through rebates and grants, and the levels of funding have kind of changed a little bit with the IRS rebates. So I think there's going to be a lot more of that, maybe a lot more, my personal opinion, a lot more interagency things in there, a lot more results-based things in there.
Tax incentives and with the property,
Exactly. I think, I don't know, that's $5 billion is a lot of money. Even a $1 billion is a lot of money. There's a lot of other things going on in the United States that, from a money standpoint, I'm not sure that we'll see that kind of thing again. I think, though, that we're here. Definitely electric buses are here to stay. I believe the support for electric buses is here to stay. We've seen some states, other states really, take it. Washington's doing some great things. The state of Washington, some great things with infrastructure. California, obviously, everybody knows about the things that California does. I think we'll probably see more of that as it develops more. But I think we need to see some success. We need to show success. Places like this, we have to show success to the rest of a state in the country to say, yes, it works. This is the return, and it's worth the investment, both from a state and a federal level. And I think that's really important. That's incumbent on us. That's the pressure that I feel and that we feel here at Beaverton. And we're doing everything possible to be as successful as possible.
Well, it shows you've definitely done your part. Mr. Beaver from Beaverton School District in Oregon. Craig Beaver, our 2024 Transportation Director of the Year. Congratulations again, sir. Looking forward to seeing you at TSD conference in about a week's time or less.
Yes.
We're going to be honoring you there. So if you're heading out to TSD conference, you'll get to meet Craig, and he'll be out there with his lovely wife for the weekend. Again, sir, it's an honor and a privilege. And again, congratulations, and we will see you soon.
Thank you so much.
A special thanks to Craig Beaver, and congratulations again on being our Transportation Director of the Year. Thanks to Ryan as well, and Taylor Ekbatani, who is not here, out on maternity leave, but we are so excited to have her and really showcase Craig and Beaverton for all the great things they're doing. Go check out that November issue, guys. We really appreciate our sponsors as well, TransFinder and School Radio, this episode. Make sure and visit stnonline.com for all the news, analysis, everything happening in the school transportation industry. Don't forget, you can also register for the TSD conference still. Go visit us on site in Frisco, Texas, November 7th through the 12th. And also STN Expo East is open, which is March 20th through the 25th, 2025. You can lock in that super early bird discount, save $200 right now. Guys, you can subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to pods. Each and every week, Nation, we got a new episode for you. We love you, Nation. We'll see you next week.